Hello everyone and welcome back to another AFL Fantasy video on the channel. So today I'm going to be talking with Mitch from the Ball Boys about his top 100 season last year and how he went from being just outside the top 100 2 years in a row to finally getting inside that top 100 last year. This recording was just before Christmas as well, so there is a little bit of reference to the Bolter team picker as fantasy wasn't quite open yet, but there's a lot of relevant information. So yeah, stay tuned for it. Hope you guys enjoy and catch you later. Hello everyone and welcome back to another AFL Fantasy Fanatics special podcast for the pre-season of 2025. As you've probably seen on the socials, the pre-season juices are flowing for a number of people out there. I thought we'd get a special guest on to chat through just some sort of early thoughts and stuff like that before we enter 2025 and the actual official preseason. I'm your host, Bales, and you can find me at BAILSDT across the socials. And joining me is a very, very special guest, the number 16th ranked coach in 2025. So 2024. Geez, I'm already getting ahead of myself there. He's got the hat there. He's back-to-back overall ranking Content Creators Cup champion and champion of the very first Content Creators Cup season. It is Mitch from the Ball Boys. Mate, how are you? How's the last couple of months gone with the off-season? Been up to much?
Yeah, mate. Oh, I'm good. I'm glad to be back on the mic and talking AFL fantasy. It feels both like it's been a long time, but it also feels it's strangely like it was just a few weeks ago as well. So, no, I've been good, mate. Did a little bit of the AFLW fantasy with yourself, and also a lot of the basketball as well. But more recently, I've just sort of taken a bit of a step back and had a bit of free time and just trying to recharge a little bit. But yeah, like you, I can definitely sense that the AFL fantasy season and the content creators out there seem to be getting back out there. And the ideas are flowing. The talk is starting to ramp up. So yeah, it's coming into Christmas time, which means that we're coming close to the game being back open, which is exciting.
Exactly right. And as I said to you off camera, a lot of people go away for a couple months, whereas I'm the guy. I never go away. I'm always there, ready to go. So obviously, I've already picked my team on Bolter, the team picker. So that's already done. Fantasy will probably open hopefully next couple of weeks, and I'll probably already put my team in. So we know that I just never leave fantasy sport in general. There's always something to go on out there. But obviously, you've been doing a bit of the NBA stuff. Just before we get into the men's footy stuff, has the NBA fantasy season gone at Ball Boys Basketball Fantasy so far this season?
Yeah, look, it's been. I'll be honest, it's been a bit of a rough one. I've had a few with my own teams, a few rough outings. Chet Holmgren was in a couple of my teams. Paul George, I drafted before he went down his injury in the preseason, so not the best of runs so far, but still a little bit optimistic. I've decided to put on pause some of the content in season for NBA whilst I kind of wrap my head around things. So you will have my undivided attention to AFL fantasy once things get going. So, but no, still tuning into my basketball and yeah, very, very happy to see what's going down in the in-season tournament at the moment.
Yeah, exactly. And I also asked you that question as well to know how it's going, but also to gloat about my own team because I'm 5 wins, a draw, funny enough, out of all things, and a loss. So going very nicely there, thanks to the advice from you in the preseason, mate. So thanks very much for that. But we will jump into some chat. So sort of we cover a couple of topics today. So we all start off with yourself, Mitch, from last year, finishing 16th overall. A lot of the season as well was inside that top 10 and up towards the pointy end there. And it was coming off the back of a couple of years where you were just outside the 100 and then just outside sort of 200, where you sort of been close but not quite sort of those extra few points to get you inside the top 100. So I guess my first question to you is, what changed last year? What were the learnings that you took from 2022 and 2023 and took into last season to end up getting you that hat and in contention for a top 10 spot?
Yeah, I think so. The last 3 years, I feel like I've been playing really well the last few years. I think there was a thing that Jaiden put up that it was like the top ranked coaches of the last 3 years. And I think I worked out that I was third amongst that list. So I don't know if that includes everyone in the competition, but just the one hat this last year. So the 2 years prior, I would always have a very strong, I guess, middle portion of the season. I think in 2022, I was up at about, I think I peaked at like 19th in 2022. I think it was the first week of the buys, or the first week after the buys, I should say. I got as high as the top 20. Had a Callum Mills captain, which I think he scored like a 40 something when I could have gone Clayton Oliver, who scored a 130. Not that I do still remember that. But it was that second half of the year that's always let me down. So I feel as though I've got a really solid approach and strategy for the first, say, 16, 17 rounds. And even sort of last year, 2023, when I finished 274, I was coming from a further way back. I think from that season, I was coming in before the buys, I was like 1,300 or something like that. But coming out of the buys, I was close to 300. I sort of made up 1,000 spots. And then like coming in really hot week on week, making lots of ground. And then after the buys, it just stopped. The momentum kind of just halted, and I couldn't really make up those last couple of hundred spots. So I think the biggest thing that got me over the hump this last year, and it still has lots of room to improve, but I think the pointy end of the season, the final luxury trades, I executed them a little bit better. I think if I did even better, I might have been having a single digit hat on my head here, but I still think compared to the previous 2 years, it was an improvement. So and I still think that's where I've got much to grow. But I would say a lot of my success over all 3 seasons has been the buys, has been where I've sort of made my move a lot. And this last year was just hanging on a bit better.
Yeah. Yeah, no, very, very obviously fantastic season to finish 16th as well. But so did you take any learnings from the previous years in terms of week to week trading? Like, was there any adjustments that you made when looking at the trade targets? Did it sort of go in the first part, you were just looking for obviously best rookies, mid prices and stuff like that, and then in later part of the year, were you looking at like premiums with the better runs, or the players that you probably thought were sort of had performed better up until that point? So what was your thoughts in terms of trading throughout the year? Did that change at all from the previous 2 years?
I think what I was doing is probably the biggest adjustment in terms of trade targets is I was basically completely ignoring ownership percentage, both in the ways that I was ignoring if a player was highly owned, but I was also ignoring the fact that the player was lowly owned. Because sometimes in an effort to be unique, in an effort to make up ground, you might sort of seek out those pods. You might also be scared to go against a certain player if they're highly owned. So my strategy is like, I mean, I do a ton of work. Obviously, I have our own podcast, have our own YouTube show. So I was sort of backing my own research a bit more and trying to block out the ownership percentage as more. And I think that was a big deal, because I remember the year before I had a choice between, I think it was Jack McRae and Cornelio. And Cornelio was the obvious popular choice, but I was trying to be a bit spicy and I went Jack McRae, and that went to crap and cost me probably 100 spots or so in that sort of season just on that one trade. So, and that was purely just me trying to be a bit different. So this year I tried to really avoid that kind of a pitfall. But I think that the last 3 seasons, like I said, the first 16 rounds, it has been a similar process in terms of trying to identify a player's value in terms of what I think they can be, what they're priced at. I think this year the success, and I don't know if it was me doing anything different, I think I just executed it better, was hitting those players that I got that instant sugar hit, as some people say, sort of. And I think that was the run, and looking at the schedule. You can have players that you want to get, but the timing in which you get them, I think, is very, very important. And it sort of gets you a week ahead of certain players, not waiting until they have a big game, identifying the matchup that could be the game that sort of gets them onto that run. And then next week, everyone else is going to be looking at them, whereas you've already got them on your team and you can hopefully look to set something else up. So easier said than done. But I think last year I was just kind of in the zone a little bit when it came to that.
Yeah, and I know Selby's talked about that as well, getting that player a week before everyone else jumps on, because then you can jump on the next guy as well. So would you say that sort of in a few instances last year that you went, or last season, you went a little bit more sort of, I guess, straight bat, if you will, like sort of you look at, you don't go for that, as you said, that spicy pie like the McRae's of the previous year, and Cornelia, you went more the straight bat. Is that probably sort of fair to say last year was a bit more like that as well? Obviously, looking into account as well that if you were really keen on a player that wasn't as popular, you still went that way as well.
Yeah, I think for the most part, and this is the tough thing about AFL fantasy these days, is that there's so much content out there and there's so many people putting out their thoughts that there can feel like a bit of an echo chamber in terms of like the podcast and that. But at the end of the day, these people know what they're talking about. Like it's not like it's just a bunch of idiots like talking nonsense and it just gets picked up for no reason. Like the popular players are usually popular for a reason. But I still think there are some moments throughout the season where the consensus says this, and I really think something different. Like I think one of the examples last year was the Tristan Sherry thing. Like the consensus at that time was getting Tristan Sherry for someone like a Jordan Sweet, make that trade. And I was keen on Jordan Sweet, but I wasn't keen on getting rid of someone like a Tristan Sherry. So I got him in as an R3 option. So it was kind of that. I was going with the crowd in terms of hedging my bets in case he does really well, but I also had a difference or a uniqueness about my team where if it did go to crap, which it did in a spectacular fashion, it wasn't a complete disaster for my team. He was just kind of sitting on my bench and maybe it was a bit of money wasted at that point. So, following the crowd at certain times when I thought the crowd was right, not trying to hit a home run every single week. But when there was some doubt, when there was some sort of like, I don't know about this consensus opinion, backing myself in to go against the grain a little bit there, but trying again not to go too risky because I think it's very easy to lose it. It's a long season, man. Like it's you can lose your season very easily, but you can't win your season in a week or a trade or anything like that.
Yeah, well, in my case, you probably could because you unfortunately had to mention. I'm getting nightmares already. You mentioned the exact trade that I think catapulted my season in a bad way. That Cherry trade, Cherry to Sweet, and then getting Sarong in the midfield was not the right trade. So
and the trade made sense at the time.
It did, and as DC makes a very good point, and he chatted about it as well during the season as well, that if that trade presents itself again, it makes a lot of sense. And maybe someone like me after the way it went, maybe I might not go there, but it was still, I think, not the right trade, but it was still a fair enough trade. And the reasoning behind it was there as well. Just the worst case scenario happened for anyone that went that way.
And that's the thing. Like, I think the important thing for anyone who's like trying to learn more, and obviously if you're listening in December, you probably a pretty serious fantasy player, or at least you want to be. Process over results, I think, is the important thing to sort of reflect on and learn by. I think that was a decent process. Obviously, the result didn't go your way, but I think where the process for me broke down, why I didn't do the trade is if you're trading out a player like Tristan Sherry, and this was before he was second half of the year, Tristan Sherry, but even at that time, he was doing everything we wanted him to do. So the trading out someone is just as important to factor in as someone you're trading in. Jordan Sweet might have been a great option, but if you're giving up a great option to get another great option, how much are you actually better? Is there another way you can get someone off your team that's a bit more of a spud for someone that maybe it's not Jordan Sweet's level of upside, but your risk of it backfiring is a lot less in that case. So I think that's something that in that particular trade sometimes get lost in terms of, there was good processing, but factor in everything in terms of like who you're trading out as well.
Yeah. And the final point I just want to make on that trade as well is that sort of doing that set me back a week. It meant I held Bonner until round 15 instead of trading him in round 13/14 when I wanted to. It also meant holding Luke Ryan after he had that good run. He was starting to spud up. I would have traded him a week or two early, but had to hold him. So it's sometimes like that where it's a bit of like a sort of avalanche effect where you just sort of, you do one trade and you got to try and catch your way back up, which is tough. But we've heard Coach, well, we've heard Chris as well, obviously, who won it last year, obviously had Tom Green for his 7. So and for people out there as well, that if you do bring in someone, they don't put up a good score the first week, or that you get an injury or a trade doesn't work out, it doesn't kill your season. And you mentioned as well that it is a training against a long season. You can sort of claw your way back from it. And I still think I finished about, was it 700-800? I can't remember the exact sort of ranking, because unless it's top 100, I don't really care. But it was still a decent enough season, even with that poor trade. So, but the one thing that we did have last year that's around again this year is opening round. So we were all hoping that the opening round wasn't going to be here. It is, and we're going to obviously deal with it again. A little bit different this year. I'm sure you've heard people out there, if you listen to fantasy podcasts and that now, you would have heard the trades obviously chatting about how it's you've got 2 teams in round 2, 4 teams in round 3, and then the other 2 teams in round 4 to get everyone's bye done before gather round in round 5. So we'll touch on last year, Mitch. What sort of learnings did you take from the opening round? Because a lot of the community, I think we're all sort of in agreement that the top end preems we weren't touching. The value preems we're probably looking at, can they sort of outperform enough of their price to justify selecting mid prices rookies? If they had a good opening round score, then they're more likely than not to be in your side. So what learnings did you take from that? And then we'll chat about next year sort of with the buy and stuff. What did you take learnings from last year?
So the learnings I took from that is that, so leading into it, I was very staunchly against starting premiums who had those early buys. When it came around to that round 0 weekend, I was surprised myself how many round 0 players I had in my team. The likes of Whitfield, Heaney. There was a lot of rookies. I even though I hated myself for it, I went with the Brodie Grundy pick because I had Tristan Sherry and Max Gawn in my starting squad the whole time.
You won the first on the Max Gawn train. You said
yes,
it's either Grundy or Cherry. It's one of the two, and Grundy forced a lot of people's hands, unfortunately, there as well. Do you start like a Zach Williams or Kitty Coleman or one? Well, obviously not. Sorry, not Kitty Coleman, because he got injured around 0. But
yeah, Williams? I started Zach Williams. So I did start a few. I didn't start any in my midfield. And I did listen to the podcast. I think it was with Chris and Holmesy and Chris talking about starting with Tom Green with his plan of always trading him at his round 3, so getting the 2 games, which we talked about in the preseason. I never had the balls to do it because things go wrong and you hold him, and he ended up being pretty average after that for a good chunk of the season. So I don't know if I'm always worried with a 1-year sample size to make a sweeping declaration of like, okay, doesn't matter. Like, you can go and start however many players from the opening round as you can. I still think there was a limit. My strategy was to pick at maximum 1 premium on each buy round. I don't think I had anyone on that Brisbane goal. Was it Brisbane? I can't even remember now.
Carlton.
I didn't have anyone on that round except for Zach Williams. I had Whitfield in the next one. Then I had Heaney on the last one. And then I had Max Gawn on the final one. So I was sort of allowing myself to have 1 premium player on each of the buy rounds because I felt like I could make up with that. And a lot of those guys were sort of must-have players. So it was always an uphill battle for me to start those players. And I think I'll approach it the same way, even more so with that the 4-team round. Because I think there's a few players on there. I think Geelong is one of those on there. There's a few players that I think are going to be very popular players. And again, it depends on the price point, because if you have a rookie price player or a mid price player, you're not putting too much money on your bench. But those premiums, it is definitely there needs to be a very good reason, I think, to start those guys for it to be worthwhile. Because I can't think of really, Max Gawn was probably the main one, but even he presented a lot of value at the start of the season. There wasn't anyone who I think was fully priced who was a smash pick, because Tom Green was good for those first couple of weeks, but then he did drop
injured. Came back and struggled for a bit. And Gawn was outperforming his price by essentially 30-odd points. Yeah. Like, he was going at 115, 120 for the first sort of couple of months of the season. Then obviously he got a bit of an injury mid-season and sort of had to carry that for a little bit. But when you're outperforming your price by 30 points, is, I guess, a bit different if you've got the early buy regardless.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that I didn't expect to be so caught up in was the price movement that was affected by the round 0 game. So, players like a Whitfield, players like a Heaney, it did feel like if you didn't start those guys, they got that big price movement after the first week, that you were essentially choosing to fade them for the first several rounds and basically missing out on that value. So I do think if you have like those those maybe not top price premiums, but those guys that are just a little bit of a rung below. Like Whitfield was priced in the low 90s. Heaney was in, I think, the 70s or 80s or something like that, where they were just that, 10, 15 points off where they ended up going eventually. They get off to a good start with that first opening round. Their price is moving in the right direction, and you've just got, I think, bite the bullet at that point, because they're probably going to be very popular, but also it's just their price is going to be kickstarting in the right direction. It's going to be hard to get them in, and you're sacrificing value if it does go well, and a lot of the other comp got them cheaper. So that was sort of the big thing, I think, that I, until that first opening round, underestimated, but we'll be definitely keeping an eye on this year.
Yeah, exactly. And I know for a fact that the one thing that we're all going to be chatting about the preseason is having a little bit of a look at the early buys and stuff like that. Myself on the Bolter team picker is that the defense, there's a lot of those value picks that we're all going to be looking at have all got the buy, and they all happen to be in round 3 as well. So like your lots of Callum Mills, Harry Perryman, Kitty Coleman, like there's a couple of others as well I haven't named there that are a little bit more expensive and cheaper, but there are a lot on that round 3 buy especially, that it's going to be interesting to see what we do. It's probably going to be one of those things, wait till round 0, who scores more, who's a bit more value, and vice versa, and then we might pick them. But that is a conversation for a little bit later in the preseason. Is there any other learnings? Well, obviously talking from opening round, obviously the first 5-6 weeks, is there anything in terms of the trading that through those weeks that you were happy with, that you maybe thought, I'm not going to do that in the future? Any sort of learnings in terms of the tradings through the opening round buys?
Yeah, I think one of the interesting things, and again, I'm always trying to learn as well, and one of the big discussion points from last year and a trade that worked for a lot of people was the Dane Zorko trade, because he had an early buy round. No one started with him, but a lot of people jumped on him early. And my big thing is I never want to get someone who's injured in that upgrade season, because that upgrade season from rounds like 5 through to the mid-season buys, I want to make sure that I'm getting an upgrade every single week. So this is another one of those examples where I'm trying to check myself and whether or not the process was still right, even if the result was obviously the right thing to do in hindsight was get on Dane Zorko early. But if I had my time again, I'm thinking that I don't think I would make that move again with someone like a Dane Zorko, who I consider to be very a high injury risk, with his age and his previous injury history and things like that. Maybe because of the move to halfback, he was in a position that maybe didn't challenge his body as much. That's maybe a bit of a learning, but that's a bit of a case by case basis. But I think that one of the things, and the other thing was like the Sean Darcy injury at the start of the season. Luke Jackson was a popular starting pick because he was like the starting ruck, but the return date of Sean Darcy coming back was around that round 5, round 6. And to me, if you're going to put yourself in a situation where in that part of the season where everyone's upgrading mid-prices, upgrading rookies, and you've got a situation where you need to either fix your ruckman that was a solo ruck and now is a dual ruck playing forward, you're putting yourself a step behind everyone else for those several weeks. So the first few weeks of the season, it better be worth that. And if it's not going to be like a smash pick, I'd rather get rid of that headache, not have to worry about that, because those weeks there are really crucial, because that's where you get that it's like a race to the mid-season buy. And if you can complete your team sooner, you can get into, like, for example, in the mid-season buy rounds, like I was trading Butters for Goulden, trading premiums left, right, and center, because I'd already completed my team to the point where I knew by the end of the buys I was going to come out with a team full of premiums. So that allowed me to kind of get ahead in that situation. So yeah, just trying to make sure that I'm hitting that cadence in terms of upgrades every week. Now, sometimes you get unlucky with injuries, but you can put yourself in situations where you can minimize that risk, I think.
Yeah, exactly. Was there any other learnings, I guess, you took from either opening round or from the rest of the season that you wanted to touch on? Obviously, as we've said, going from outside top 100 in as well, a few things obviously went well for you as well last year, obviously, and as I mentioned at the start of the thing, back-to-back Content Creators Cup overall winner, which is obviously very good. So you're the person people are hunting down in terms of ranking next year of the content creators. So anything else for the last couple of years that you've taken from the whole season, just in general, that you wanted to quickly discuss?
I think, and it's easier said than done. I think there's a massive psychology element to fantasy sports in general. But I think as a community and as content creators as well, we need to be a little bit better in terms of backtracking and explaining good performances early in the season, and not assuming that because someone's put up a few good scores early on that it's going to be okay. They're going to be as good as they're going to be for the rest of the season. Like Caleb Sarong was one. His, I think, first 2 or 3 weeks of the season, he went off to a massive, massive start. But since that point, was pretty average. That whole Luke Ryan situation where he had that hot patch. I actually avoided Luke Ryan for a little while, and this is where that FOMO kicked in because he had a matchup against Richmond. I didn't have him. I missed a few poor scores, but I was scared to go against him in that kind of a matchup, and I got him in. It ended up being the wrong move. So if there's been a couple of big scores, is there an explanation to why? Is that going to be something that we can reasonably expect to carry on in the future? Or is it better to just go, okay, I missed that. Is there someone else that's coming up that no one's talking about yet? So it's that when you trade someone in, you don't get their scores. That's what we've always joked about. But it is easier. It's easier said than done because early in the season, you've only got so much data because it's, you're only a few weeks in. And so it can be easy to sort of think someone's doing this now. It's just going to keep happening like that for the rest of the season. So I think just being a little bit more skeptical on those kind of things is always, I think, a good way to go about it.
Yeah. Well, I was able to get Luke Ryan a couple of weeks of those good scores,
well.
But then
you timed it well. Yeah.
I remember because I remember I did the Sheasel move, Sheasel out for Luke Ryan, and I was sort of the head wobble was there. I was pretty strong on this. It's just worked well, and then it sort of didn't work as well. But the process, I guess, behind the original decision worked well. It was just, again, the whole Cherry thing, trading him out and whatever, put me probably a couple weeks behind, which meant that Ryan stayed for a bit longer as well. But I guess there's the other thing as well with the thing I learned as well is that just because a player's done well in their first 7, 8, 9 weeks doesn't mean they're going to continue it. As you say, we saw the change in Freo, and we're going to use just Freo as the example because we talk about Sarong and Luke Ryan as well. Their scores dropped off dramatically when they stopped that chipping round as well. And especially because Sarong had played so well, the attention was going to him more and his scores weren't as good. And I guess that's probably one thing that I've learned last couple of years is to catch on to those things. And we hear the good coaches talk about watching games of footy. That's the sort of best research you can do is watching it for yourself, and you can see the trends and stuff in game. And we saw Freo when they changed it, their scores dropped off. And if you jumped off those players at the right time, you're a step ahead. Whereas if you held on to them for a week or two too long, you're a step behind. So that's sort of one thing that I learned as well.
And you can't get married to your players. Like I think I did this at the end of the season. I think I had 2 players that I had the entire season. Lockie Whitfield was one. And I'm pretty sure it was like a red dot rookie. That was the other one. I can't remember who exactly it was. But Heaney would have been another one if he didn't miss, I think it was the last round of the season.
Against Crows,
So I think I ended up trading him, although I think I traded him to no one anyway. So, but yeah, most of my team, I didn't have the same team the whole time. So you're getting on guys, you're getting off guys at certain times and things like that. So yeah, just riding those waves and being a step ahead. And like I said, it's easier said than done. But yeah, not being too caught up in what they've done, always looking ahead. So yeah.
Exactly. And you talk about like, you don't want to be like, obviously can't be married to players. And when we hear that term a little bit as well, especially during luxury trade season for someone obviously in your position where you were in the top 10, I think you got to up to 5 as well. Like at one point,
what was my height?
Yeah. 4th, was that what you said?
Yeah.
4th. So during luxury trade season, I guess, because that luxury trade season would have been a lot different to you than previous years. Because obviously previous years you were trying to claw your way into the top 100, whereas last year was sort of you're in that position of do you do that extra little bit to get the Hilux, or do you sort of just consolidate a top 10 spot? So I guess my question is, how did the luxury trade season go for you, and what would be the learnings you took from that scenario of being in that middle ground of being the hunted and also the hunter at the same time? Sort of what learnings did you take from that?
Yeah, it was an interesting period. I think
Luke was talking about driving the Hilux and everything like that. There was
with the number plates and everything.
Yeah.
It's a different mental game. I found myself, you sort of get into a rhythm in this early part of the season, into the bye rounds, and you sort of know you've got this like structured game plan. And then it comes out to the end of the season, you've got these 22 premiums. There was this whole thing of, do you get a 23rd premium? I think Chris even had a 24th premium. So depending on how early we finish our teams, I think that's something that I am interested in exploring the possibilities to do that a bit more, and having the ability to loop multiple areas of the ground. I'm not sure exactly. I think we're going to have less money this year from what I'm hearing in terms of just the starting salary cap in total. And we also had a lot of players that hit really well. Opening round maybe is something to do with that kickstart to cash generation. So potentially might happen again this year. But if we are coming out of that, if we're going into the buys, basically teams nearly completed, just continue to build that team value. So maybe you can get that 23rd, 24th premium, I think is something that I want to explore a little bit more, because from a psychological point of view, like being in the top 10, I was always in the mindset, I was trying to go for the car. I was trying to win. If you're not first, you're last, was sort of my motto. So one trade that I really regret was I traded out Tristan Sherry to get Rowan Marshall. It wasn't that trade that I regretted, because at that time I was going to be the only player in the top 10 that had Rowan Marshall, who was the highest scoring player for the season. So I thought that would be an edge. But I traded out Tristan Sherry. I then had an opportunity to trade him back in when Max Gawn went down. But I went Tim English instead, because I wanted to be a little bit more unique. I think I was a little bit in love with what Tim English had did the previous season, and I was probably hanging on to that a bit too much. And then as soon as I traded in Tim English, Tristan Sherry started going on his run. And I was, I think I was the only one in the top 10 at that time that didn't have Tristan Sherry. And he just kept whacking 150s on me. I think there was 3 150s in a row. They were all captained by everyone in the top 10. So there's 300 points that I'm missing out on. The first week I managed to hang on, but the second week it was just too much and I fell out. I got him in that third week, but I think that
bit of damage had been
that damage was done by that point. So being a little bit cute, trying to be a little bit too unique, a bit too early. And that's a bit of the struggle. I think getting the timing right of when do you want to attack, when do you want to go with the crowd, use other parts of your team that's unique to make up ground, is something that I think I can still get a bit better at. Because I think I probably just went a bit too unique too early at that point.
With the trades, were you more looking at the teams are the top sort of 20, 25 teams, the teams around you, or were you still using a bit of that, like what you'd seen in games and looking at the players you were more interested in bringing, not necessarily the teams around you? Or did that come in a little bit more the last couple of weeks? Were you looking at teams? How did that sort of go for you?
After the bye rounds, when I was coming in, I think rounds, I can't remember when the buys finished. Round 16 or 17.
Round 15 was the last one.
Yeah. And so I was in the top 10 at that point. And it was at that point where I sort of had a list of, okay, here's the top 10. Here are the players that I've got different. Do I think I'm ahead? Do I think I'm behind? Where is the uniqueness that I can attack? Who are these players out there like a Rowan Marshall that I think I can get a leg up in by doing so? Because the other thing was, at this point, and I'd never been in this position where I felt like I was so cashed up that I didn't need to be hunting the value anymore. It was just like, okay, who's the best player? And previously I'd still been a little bit behind in that team value game, but this season, for whatever reason, I felt a bit cashed up compared to some other teams. So, but I still think that was a bit of a mistake. Like I missed out on a Connor Rosie. I didn't go there because he was super cheap and I just wanted to get someone a bit more expensive. And I think that would have allowed me to do some more things later on. But I was keeping an eye on who was around. It wasn't informing all of what I did. But if there was ever like a coin flip, it was sort of, okay, well, I think this has a chance to catapult me up. Turns out some of them had the chance to rocket me back down. But yeah, it was an interesting kind of game that I hadn't been involved in previously because obviously I'd never been up that high.
Yeah. I guess sort of the final thing we'll touch on before we maybe go a couple of little things for the upcoming season is that if obviously you were being in the top 10 last year and then still top 20 for most of the back half of the year, if the roles were a little bit different and you were 90th, 80 or something, even just outside top 100, for those coaches out there that are battling with that, because obviously there's not as many, obviously battling for the top 10, top 20 at that point compared to top 100. Is there anything that you would change from what you might have done in 2022 and 2023 and you learned you took from that at the back end of the year that you'll be taking forward if maybe if you're not up that high, maybe if you are like anywhere from 80th to 150th or even 200th heading into the last sort of 2, 3, 4 weeks of season? Any sort of learnings from that maybe for the listeners out there that maybe didn't quite get a hat this year or got one, but they're still trying to learn? What sort of things would you take out of that?
I think, and this is combining what I learned in 2022, where I finished 123. That season, I was top 30 for a good while, and then I captained Callum Mills, went back to like 70th, 80th, and I was there for a lot of the season, sort of between 70th and 120th, like trying to battle it out. And I think if I was closer to that mark, I'd actually go more vanilla for longer, because when I was sitting in 4th, top 10, I felt as though I'm going for something, and even if it stuffs up, even if it goes the worst possible case, I'm gonna fall back to a position where I still have a chance to compete for a hat. And I felt as though I don't know if I'm ever going to be here again. I don't know if I'm ever going to like have a chance to win the car. And obviously I didn't get it, but even if things went as bad as they do, and I don't trade in Tristan Sherry and he whacks 350s on my head and everyone captains him, I can still get a pretty respectable round. So, but if I was sitting 80th and that happened like this time, I don't know if I make that trade, because if it went the way it did, I'm probably not sitting here with a hat, and I've had another season where I'm nearly there. So I think I would delay the uniqueness factor until the last week or two, really, and try and let other people make those mistakes. Other people sort of crack under pressure, as it were, instead of, when I've got a bit more buffer room when I'm in the top 10, I think, to make those sort of bold swings. I don't know if that's the right way to go about it, but it's probably how I would approach it with my 123 season and last season in mind.
Yeah, it reminds me a bit of the sort of baseball analogy that I know a few people goes that a lot of the sort of the baseball batters try and hit a home run first one, but if they get a strike or two, they might just go to get it to the first or second base or something like that. So that's sort of, when saying sort of like that, that's sort of what it sort of reminds me of, is that if you're sort of in a little bit higher up and you can take that swing early, if it doesn't work, you can fall back on. You're still in top 100, still going for that. Whereas if you're around to the later part, it's almost like you've had a couple of strikes out already. You can't afford another one, or maybe you do go for it and it works out really well. So no, I do like those points there. And that's something I learned as well from people that were following from the AFLW fantasy standpoint. If you weren't and you sort of were doing the men's and you're sort of tuning back in now and listening back to this, I finished just outside the top 100. Couple of things. I had a couple of injuries as well, so I was still quite happy the fact that I was able to get to that position. But I was, I think, 400-500 coming out of the second double game week in round 7, and I was getting really, really close and to a hat, and I got to 116th with a round to go, and Bonnie Toogle got injured, and I had a chance to captain Mim Strom on the Sunday, and I opted for the safer position and took the Marinoff 107. And if I hadn't have done that and I had have gone Mim Strom captain, who, again, no one expected to go 166 or 167 or whatever she did. But in saying that, the thing I learned from that and that I'll take for the men's is that even still take that risk, because even if it falls short, you're relying on just other players to get the job done. And even if you miss out, you're going to miss out anyway. So like, I sort of should have taken that swing because I had nothing to lose. But yeah, that was unfortunate. And I'm still have nightmares about that. So that will, that'll be,
They live.
Yeah, and someone like me as well, it sees a hole in my brain, and I'm just like, why didn't I do it? I remember just sitting obviously I was in America at the time. I was just sitting on the bed thinking, like, what did I do? Why did I stuff up so bad? The whole world was ending. I was like, nah. But no, I've started to recover now. So we're sort of shifting focus to the 2025 men's season, which is what we'll.
You should have seen me trying to watch these North Melbourne games when Tristan Sherry was getting 80 points a quarter. I was a mess. it's a tough watch. But I will say, like, that, and people sometimes will give me shit about it. Like, there's a lot of luck involved. There really is. I think if you're a good coach and you're having a good season, you can get, like, if you're top 1,000, that's a good season. That's a really good season. To be at the pointy end, you got to have some things go your way. Like, there was a time, I think it was Max Gorn was the late fitness test one day
against Marshall. Yeah,
and I was doing something else. Usually I'm on top of it. I'm checking Twitter. I'm doing everything. But this day, for whatever reason, I was hanging with the missus and trying to detach a bit from footy. So I missed that news, and I had the captaincy on him. Had I have seen that news, there's no doubt that in my mind that I would have taken the captaincy off him and put it on someone else. And then he comes out and scores like a 160. Everyone else has taken the captaincy off him. I've got the captaincy on. I think that was the week I charged into top 100. So that was pure luck. There was like he had a good matchup, and there was a reason he was my captain in the first place. But if I had all the information, I would have changed that decision. So to me, that's a luck call. And I had a few of those, and I think it would be ignorant of me to say that I didn't require luck to get where I was. I needed to be skillful, but there definitely is a fair bit of luck element to get right to the pointy end, which the top 100 is in a game where there's 100,000 people that play.
Yeah, exactly. And as you said there as well, I still think top thousands it is essentially like the new 100. Top 100 was like 5-10 years ago. Like it's so much more competitive with so much content out there. A lot more different statistics and analysis that can help people make informed decisions in terms of trades and trade outs. I think that sort of made it so much more competitive, and to finish top 100 now is an amazing achievement. Obviously, you get the hat, and even top 1,000, even if you fall short, it's still a very, very good season. And as you say, 100,000+ people, I think it might even be close to 150,000, but it's obviously a lot of people that play. And if you're in the top 1,000 in the country, that finishes there, then you're going quite well. So perfect. Well, we'll wrap it up there. But no, Mitch, mate, thanks very much for jumping on and getting dusting off the mic. Well, actually, not really dusting off, because I see it is a new mic there. So taking it out of the wrapper and then putting it up there. So, mate, good to have you.
Right. Hopefully I sound okay. I had to get something that didn't cover this beautiful hat here. So we had the headphones before, but I wanted this thing to be, you know, nice and shiny and in center. So I can just gloat the entire season.
Yeah, you might have to sit on the left of the screen, so then Luke can see the number 16 every podcast. Because sit to him like that. Yeah, or have it flip back.
I'm cool like that.
Yeah, no, beautiful. Now, thanks, mate. We very much appreciate jumping on, and thanks for jumping on, having a bit of a chat early in December, mate. But where can the people find you across the socials and the podcast, and also sort of maybe want to tease maybe a few things about what could we expect from the Ball Boys in 2025? It's been a very, very good first couple of seasons by you boys.
Yeah, well, you can definitely go ahead. Talking about locks, you can lock in a 3-time premiership in the Content Creators Cup. You can go ahead and deal and deliver that. So another $5,000 coming for you, Black Dog. No, not really, but hopefully we can go the triple premiership and do a 3-peat. But no, I've got a few things in the plans, but I don't know if I can announce any of the exciting things just yet. But there might be some exciting news coming soon. We should be getting underway with our content. Usually we like to start close to that Christmas, maybe January sort of time, pace ourselves a little bit. But once we get into January, you should be seeing sort of maybe 2 or 3 podcasts coming from us every week. We usually start by going through the positions and the premium options, the mid prices, touch on the rookies a bit later. We'll reveal our early teams and things like that. All the good stuff that you guys hopefully enjoy watching and listening to. So find us at Ball Boys AFL Fantasy Podcast. I'm on Twitter or X at Ball Boys Fantasy if you want to listen to my ramblings on over there.
Yep, no, beautiful. Make sure you go and follow Mitch and also Luke at LukeRojo17 as well. We know Luke's a bit more dormant when it comes to the Twitter sphere, but make sure you go. Exactly. Make sure you go and follow the boys there as well, and especially the Friday afternoons. It's a highlight for my weeks when I know a lot of people out there as well with the live shows, especially.
Come and join us. It's good. It's a good start to your weekend.
Yep, exactly right. So, and you can find me at BAILSDT as well. You can find us at AFL Fantasy Fans on Twitter. Mitch, as I said, thank you very much for jumping on. Thanks everyone that tuned in at this early stage of preseason. And get ready for an exciting 2025. Thanks everyone, and we'll catch you a little bit later on. See ya.
See ya.